Behind one of the most beautiful temples in Egypt lies a structure that looks like it belongs to another age. The masonry is unlike anything above it. Massive granite pillars and beams fill a sunken central hall. A stone island rises out of a channel of dark water, and the whole structure sits far below the floor of the temple next door. At first glance, it doesn't read as a temple. It doesn't read as a royal tomb either. That mismatch is exactly why some people insist this building must be thousands of years older than the pharaoh it's officially credited to, Seti I. The real archaeological record tells a different story, and it's a stranger one. The site is Abydos, Upper Egypt, tucked directly behind the Temple of Seti I. For thousands of years, Abydos was one of Egypt's most sacred religious centers, tied to the cult of Osiris, god of death, resurrection, and the legitimacy of kings. It sits roughly 450 kilometers south of Cairo, and pilgrims traveled here for millennia. Nearby lies el-Kab, the site's oldest necropolis, which New Kingdom Egyptians themselves came to regard as the actual burial place of Osiris. That belief is why Abydos didn't just attract royal building projects. It drew thousands of private memorial stelae and chapels from ordinary Egyptians, hoping to place themselves symbolically near the god. The Osirian sits inside that religious landscape, not apart from it. The Osirian itself is a monumental, partly underground structure attached to Seti's temple complex. 10 enormous granite piers ring the central hall. 7 were carved from a single block of stone. 3 were assembled from 2 pieces each. That detail alone already breaks the one mysterious unified technology myth. The builders clearly adapted their methods block by block. Beyond the central hall, the complex includes a long entrance corridor, side passages, and additional chambers, with religious and funerary inscriptions covering the walls and lintels. Calling this a room full of water undersells it. This was a carefully planned religious monument with its own architectural and textual program. This wasn't uncovered in one dramatic afternoon. Flinders Petrie first identified parts of the monument in 1901. Margaret Murray carried out major excavation and recording work in 1902 and 1903, publishing the first systematic study of the Osireion. Between Murray's work and Frankfurt's, Edouard Neville resumed the clearance in 1912, and other researchers from the Egypt Exploration Fund continued investigating the site. After the First World War, Henri Frankfurt picked the investigation back up, running major excavations from 1925 to 1930, fully exposing the main structure already in 1925. His 1933 study, the Cenotaph of Seti I at Abydos, is still the foundational reference on this building. Decades of fieldwork spread across several expeditions and several archaeologists, not a single lucky discovery by one person. Now the question people actually came here for: how old is this place really? The scholarly consensus is specific. The Osirian is dated to the reign of Seti I in the late 13th century BCE. That dating rests on its physical connection to Seti's temple, its architectural layout, royal and religious inscriptions, its funerary program, and later decoration added under his successor, Merneptah. So why does it sit so much lower than the temple beside it? Alternative theories run with that gap. Lower must mean older. Heavier, plainer stonework must mean some unknown megalithic civilization. But depth alone proves nothing. A building can be deliberately sunk into the ground, especially when its entire religious meaning is built around descent, burial, water, and rebirth. An archaic look can be a deliberate choice too. Egyptian kings borrowed forms from earlier eras all the time, specifically to project antiquity, legitimacy, and continuity with the sacred past. Be careful with an exact figure like 8 meters below the temple. Different surveys measure different ancient and modern reference points. One more claim worth killing here: the idea that the official dating only exists because Seti's name was added to the site later, after the fact. That claim ignores the building's entire archaeological context: the layout, the inscriptions, the funerary program. Debates about individual construction phases are real, but the mainstream archaeological position doesn't place the main monument in the hands of an unknown prehistoric civilization. What isn't in dispute, building this required solving one of the hardest engineering problems of its era. The granite came from the Aswan region, hundreds of kilometers south of Abydos. It had to be quarried, shaped, hauled to the Nile, shipped downriver, unloaded, dragged overland, and set with precision inside a deep excavation pit. Each stage needed its own specialized crew, quarrymen, boat crews, transport organizers, and large groups of laborers. That's an enormous logistical achievement, but one that fits comfortably within what New Kingdom Egypt is already known to have pulled off elsewhere, an era that also moved obelisks and colossal statues across comparable distances. Skip the exact tonnage you'll see online. Numbers like 100 tons aren't backed by reliable engineering measurements for these specific blocks. The safer statement, some of these granite elements may have weighed tens of tons. So how did they actually get raised and set in place? There's no surviving construction manual, but the general sequence probably went something like this. Dig a large construction pit, lay the foundations and surrounding walls, move the granite blocks into the open excavation, raise the piers, set the lintels, and only then finish and decorate the rest of the complex around it. The likely toolkit: earthen ramps, sledges, ropes, levers, and large organized labor crews. That's a plausible reconstruction, not a documented fact for every single stage. And here's a myth worth killing outright. The builders almost certainly weren't lowering 50 or 100-ton stones into an already flooded chamber. This was assembled in an open pit, long before it ever took on the sealed underground form we see today. Which brings us to the water, the single most recognizable feature of the Osirian. Two separate questions get blurred together here. The channel surrounding the central island does appear to have been part of the original design. But the amount and depth of water you see today is shaped by the modern groundwater table, and it isn't necessarily identical to how the sanctuary looked in antiquity. One well-supported interpretation: that central stone island represented the primeval mound rising out of the waters of Nun, the chaotic ocean that, in Egyptian belief, existed before creation itself. Which means this wasn't just a burial chamber. It was a three-dimensional model of death, creation, and rebirth. Academic work on the Abydos complex directly ties its water features and central mound to Egyptian creation theology and the idea of Osirian rebirth. This isn't a fringe idea. It's one of the leading scholarly readings of the monument. So what was it actually built for? The best supported answer: a symbolic tomb, a cenotaph tied to the cult of Osiris, part of Seti I's funerary complex, representing the god's death and return to life. Seti I's real tomb is KV-17 in the Valley of the Kings, nowhere near Abydos, which means the Osirion was never meant to hold his body. A cenotaph is exactly that, a symbolic tomb for someone buried somewhere else. Abydos was considered Osiris's principal sacred ground, the place ancient tradition linked to his death and resurrection. Pilgrims traveled here for generations, building memorial chapels and stelae, hoping to symbolically share in Osiris's victory over death. Seti I building an Osirian monument here fits that religious landscape perfectly. The name Osirion is modern, but it captures exactly what the building was for. Inside, excavators recorded funerary and cosmological texts, material connected to the Book of Gates, the Amduat, the book of what is in the underworld. Other funerary and celestial compositions, plus royal inscriptions tied to both Seti I and Merneptah. Murray's original publication recorded not just those texts, but later graffiti on the walls too, useful evidence for how the monument's use and appearance shifted over time. Those inscriptions are precisely why this can't seriously be treated as some anonymous prehistoric ruin with no link to the Ramesside period. At the same time, Seti I likely didn't finish every decorated section during his own lifetime. Some of the inscriptions and finishing work are credited to his son and successor, Merneptah. That doesn't mean Merneptah built the thing from scratch. More likely, he continued and completed his father's project. There's also a modern claim worth addressing directly: geometric patterns inside the monument, sometimes labeled the flower of life. This isn't evidence of laser technology, and it isn't accepted proof of some global prehistoric civilization. Some of the well-known versions of this pattern found in Egyptian monuments are much later graffiti, and graffiti doesn't date the structure underneath it. It's a fun detail for keeping viewers engaged, but it shouldn't carry the whole video. Its exact location, period, and technique deserve far more careful verification than most popular videos on this topic give it. So why does the architecture itself look older than the decorated columns of Seti's temple right next door? Many Egyptologists read that stark, heavy style as intentional, a way to signal primordial age, permanence, and continuity with the earliest era of the gods. That's an interpretation, though, not a surviving instruction from the architects themselves. So what does the archaeology actually establish? The Osirian belongs to the sacred landscape of Abydos. It was part of the wider complex built around Seti I. Its construction is placed in the Ramesside period. It held a monumental hall with granite piers surrounded by a channel. Its texts and imagery are tied to death, the underworld, creation, and rebirth. It functioned as a symbolic tomb, an Osirian cenotaph, not as Seti I's actual burial place. Merneptah helped complete and decorate parts of it. And what's genuinely still unknown? The exact construction sequence. What the original roof looked like in full. The detailed method used to raise and set every single granite element. How the ancient Egyptians actually managed the water in that central channel. Which sections were finished under Seti I and which under Merneptah. How priests and pilgrims actually moved through the space during rituals. That's more than enough mystery, without inventing a lost civilization to explain it. It is also unclear whether the entire planned architectural and decorative program was ever fully completed. But moving the stones is only half the story. The Egyptians didn't put these blocks under the temple just to prove they could. Every part of this chamber, the water, the central island, even the descent into darkness, appears to have carried meaning. The Osirian doesn't need to be 10,000 years old to be extraordinary. Its builders hauled massive granite elements across the length of Egypt, lowered them into a monumental excavation, and built a stone island surrounded by the waters of an artificial underworld. They weren't trying to build an ordinary room. They were trying to recreate the very first moment of existence, the mound of creation rising out of darkness and water, and bind Seti I forever to the death and resurrection of Osiris. So maybe the deepest mystery isn't who built the Osirian. The evidence points clearly to Seti I's builders. The bigger question is this: why would a king at the height of New Kingdom power want his monument to look as if it had been standing there since the beginning of time? Maybe the answer is simpler than it sounds. A pharaoh's power never rested on armies and taxes alone. It rested on an unbroken connection to the gods and the ancestors. If that's right, the Osirian isn't a hoax or a mystery to be solved. It's one of the most ambitious architectural statements about time that ancient Egypt ever built.